Good afternoon. I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Tuesday, May the 24th. News in Arkansas today. We had a big hearing in Little Rock last night on 30 crossing, the Interstate 30 project to widen Interstate 30 through downtown Little Rock from 8 to 10 to 12, who knows how many lanes. The city board hired a consultant to give some thoughts on it. And this emerged from that meeting. Number one, the planning began from the presumption that the highway department's going to get its way. That is, it's going to be a big concrete gulch, and we're going to have a 12-lane bridge, one of the third widest in the United States. And the only thing the city can do is hope for a little bit of improvement on the margins. The consultant said one thing that was very important, that is this is going to create a monumental problem on the downtown grid in terms of traffic flow unless something is done about it. To date, nobody has any ideas exactly what to do. The other great thing that came out of the meeting last night where the consultant said, you know, this road through Little Rock, if it looked and functioned a lot like a boulevard with landscaping, shrubbery and trees, and access to east-west streets at virtually every street crossing, like a boulevard would do, this could really work well. Well, of course, the boulevard idea has been rejected by the Highway Department. The Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods has written a letter saying, isn't it time, after 3 separate sets of experts have said we're facing grid problems, to look at a different way of doing this? I would hope so. The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette this morning finally got around to looking, after it was a done deal, the bill to take over the Governor's Mansion commission by Asa Hutchinson. They quoted some Hutchinson people as saying, well, the governor had nothing to do with this. This was legislators' ideas. This is absolute silliness. A lie, perhaps, is not too strong a word to use. Of course, they're covering for their boss. Susan Hutchinson doesn't like having the public in the mansion. She's setting up procedures that are going to keep them out of the old historic public rooms. She's spending a fortune in there with newfangled Christmas decorations and other sorts of things that are somewhat different than the historical motif that had been established for years by the appointed commission that had the long view of history for the mansion. The Hutchinsons want a different look, and now they've got the law that lets them do it. They're spending the money up, though, and there's some time for some accountability, which to date the Hutchinson administration has not been willing to provide on spending. They're spending a lot more money than the Beebes did, and the public needs to know, particularly when Governor Hutchinson is out talking about how tough times are and how state employees aren't due a pay raise, and we're going to have to just take money from other state needs to build highways. Speaking of highways, he got his highway plan, and he said it's a highway plan without a tax increase. It's not coincidental at all that every college in the state of Arkansas right now is raising tuition and fees from 3 to 4 to 6% to even higher on a couple of small campuses. This is because the colleges are expecting still less money from the state. They have to make it up somewhere. It's going to come out of students. Some people don't really care what happened to college students. Higher education is high on the agenda, some people, but other people are hurt by this too, particularly young children who could get pre-K education if the government expanded, but he said the time is just not right. We just can't afford it. We can afford fancy decorations in the governor's mansion, but not pre-K education. That tells you something about priorities in Arkansas today. We learned today that the state Supreme Court Committee on Professional Conduct, which regulates the conduct of lawyers, has reprimanded and given a $4,100 fine to Ben Lipscomb, who was a Rogers city attorney. It turns out he was city attorney for 5 years when he wasn't qualified to be city attorney. He was paid something like $500,000 that he wasn't entitled to get. He voted illegally in one election as a resident of Rogers when he was not. And for all this, he pays a $4,100 fine. That's not exactly tough justice. He walked away from that pretty well. Interesting story in the New York Times this morning. Remember Kenneth Starr, the Whitewater prosecutor? He gave a speech last week in which he said any number of nice things about Bill Clinton, a great philanthropist since he left office, somebody who really connected with Arkansas people, a man who stands out among politicians almost of all time. Funny thing from Ken Starr, who pursued every angle like a unforgiving Javert in Les Mis to get Bill Clinton over those years and finally snagged him on a minor sex scandal. Ken Starr himself, by the way, is enmeshed in a sex scandal at Baylor. The football players have been acting up down there, and he's been accused of doing a poor job of doing anything about it. Some people say he may lose his job over that, so there is a little bit of irony. And the Civil War continues in Arkansas. A Hot Springs woman says she was punched after getting in a scrap with a couple of people who didn't like the Confederate flag decal on her car. And in Fort Smith, an athletic director, a couple of members of the school board, and the school superintendent have all departed or been defeated in an election, in part because of a big fight waged by a single-minded and somewhat unhinged attorney, I think, in Fort Smith over the changing of the rebel mascot at the Fort Smith Southside High School. Who says old times here are not forgotten? I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.